to the next presenter. We have just slightly south of Margaret, but not too far from her, maybe 100 miles away. We have Amitra, and Amitra lives in Bengal, in Kolkata, and he works across the state, especially in the wetlands of Sundarbans, which is like the mangroves of a delta where two of the mightiest rivers in India empty out into the sea, the Brahmaputra and the Ganges. Amitra and his wife Santosh have spent the last 2 decades exploring the length and breadth of their home state, Bengal. And they've been connecting with craftspeople of various traditions, from pottery, wood carving, folk painting, to weavers, dyers, spinners, printers, and embroiderers. While they were at work and really building their business, the world was struck by COVID. But in the summer of 2020, while COVID devastated across the world, and the world came to a standstill with lockdowns, Bengal was doubly stricken because it had this devastating cyclone. They had the worst storms that they have had in decades. And it brought in rains, wrought in ruin to millions of people residing in the region. Homes and fields were flooded while minds were wrecked in despair. For a people who were under a strict lockdown due to COVID, it was doubly difficult of time for them to grapple with the filth, the damp, the ruin that the flooding storm brought in. Amitra and his friends were quick to amass and distribute rations to several villages, which took care of the immediate needs of 1,000 families. Rebuilding homes and lives was the next step. Amitra realized that it's simpler to address the physical destruction faced by a people, but what of the trauma and the mental devastation that was suffered from a double calamity of COVID and cyclone? How does one calm the mind and bring people back to focus on hope for a better tomorrow? Here is Amitra sharing his story, spinning the threads of hope. Over to you.
Thank you, Devika. Hello, Lee, Philip, Nina, and friends across the continent. Last year, I was in a remote village where I met some extraordinary group of women. They were spinning yarn from a cocoon using their bare thighs and finger. Thigh reeling is one of the oldest skills to extract yarn. Looking at the dexterity and fineness, I came up with the Sanskrit name Gunavali, which means dexterity and quality. Hi, I'm Amit, and I'm a designer at Saha Works Collab, and I'm going to take you through this wonderful journey of hope and heart. So this is a map of undivided India and undivided Bengal. And the marked area is Calcutta, where I live and practice. The reason why I'm sharing this old map, because the roots goes back to undivided India and Bengal. Bengal then known for its fabulous fine cotton, also known for Dhaka muslin, as Dhaka was the important city of Bengal province. By March 2020, the whole world was fighting COVID, and we all stood in hand in solidarity with the world. On May 20, 2020, came Amphan. It was the strongest tropical cyclone to strike Ganges Delta, causing over $13 billion damage and taking innumerable lives, creating havoc mentally and physically. We were getting distress calls from everywhere. And then when I started writing on Facebook, and help started pouring in. And every week used to collect ration and distribute far off Amphan affected areas. The effect of Amphan was so bad that when I had to reach some of the places, we had to take a day, 2 days to reach there because the roads were washed off. And that's how we started this initiative called Heart for Handmade. Communities belonging to the creative and cultural industries were the one who were affected the most. They had nowhere to sell their products. They didn't have enough savings to sustain. To come out of this distress, they required was work. What they required was work. They didn't beg for ration, they begged for work. They were creative people and they wanted their dignity back. Looms were lying idle as they were banished. Some of them sold their looms. There was no work. This was also the time when we saw a huge number of migration. Artists were selling off their looms and tools, taking up menial jobs and day laborers. Once the restrictions were withdrawn, heavy industries required manpower, and so menfolk left their creative practices to join forces. The women stayed back to look after their kin and family. But to every problem, there are most simple solutions. We may be familiar with the term muslin, but we do not really know muslin. We have felt the fine fabric which Marco Polo liked, called white gold, or seen anything close to delicate and diaphanous folds of Bengal muslin. Do we know the rigor of those hands that farmed the footy kapas, spun the shimmering silvery cotton fiber into extremely fine yarn, and the adore hands that wove into the finest fabric, whose every charm became the hand-spun fabric, also often called the fabric of freedom. Do we need another freedom from the bondage of mind and to liberate and create a fabric which will bring food, freedom, and fertility? There was a tremendous amount of anxiety and disbelief, and the calmness of mind could come together through meditation, and spinning yarn aptly stepped into the frame. The legendary fabric did bring about a change 75 years ago, and it was time to reinvent it. A fabric so fine, Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb said to have sided his daughter for appearing in the nude. In fact, she was draped in 7 layers of it. Dhaka muslin was once considered the benchmark. Its cotton was glossy, feathery, light, and transparent. Its fiber was capable of being spun into threads above 1,000 counts. The weavers produced both plain fabric and flowered jamdani, also called Aurangzebi, because it was favored by Mughal emperor. The finest muslin made out of footy kapas, which was grown in certain localities of banks of Brahmaputra and its tributaries. The other kind of cotton called Bairat and Desi were inferior and were produced in different parts of West Bengal. They were used to manufacture lighter and slight inferior coarser cloths. The production of the weavers consisted of fabrics varying quality, ranging from very fine textured to coarser and thicker warp. Muslins were designated by names denoting their fineness or transparency of the texture. Some of the names were called Juna, Rang, Khas, Abriwan, Shabnam, Tazib, Nansuk, Shirband, Kameez, Charkona, Jamdani. The finest sorts of muslin was called malmal, sometimes mentioned as malmal sahi or malmal khas by foreign travelers. The unique Dhaka muslin woven from special cotton plant called footy kapas was identified by William Roxburgh, the father of Indian botany. Growing along the mudlined banks of Brahmaputra, this rain-fed cotton was nourished by the flood-borne nutrients of the Meghna River of East Bengal. It is now extinct, and nothing quite resembles the red-stemmed plant that bloomed in Bengal's unique riverine nursery. The fact that the plant which created this legendary fabric has been wiped out speaks of ethics adopted by mechanization. Yet, with dexterity of hands and traditional knowledge, we could produce fine muslins up to 500 counts. Muslin has lived 1,000 years and still contemporary appeal. This connects past and present, east and west. Thus, with a handful of people, we started our journey. This is a sari, which was hand spun and hand woven, naturally dyed, and we felt why what we wear and how you feel. And that's what exactly the Roman statesman scholar Pliny lamented on the expensive test of Roman women for muslin emptied their coffers of Rome. With the establishment of East India Company's monopoly, trade with other European countries diminished. However, the most significant reason change in the status and decline of the muslin handloom production in India was the Industrial Revolution in England. Costly handcrafted cotton goods, particularly muslin, lost out in the competition with cheaper fabric produced by machine. In one of the stories that one of my old grandmother weaver was telling me, that her mother was weaving and spinning very fine threads, and one certain day she found that those threads are not available in the market, and when and her products were not selling, so she went to the market to find out what is happening, why her products were not selling, and she found out that the market is flooded with Manchester cotton. So this is the process of spinning and muslin. The muslin involves about 25 stages where people are involved, and thus when you buy a muslin jamdani fabric, the money that is generated is been divided into at least 25 people. There are more. There are accessory works which are not here being counted, like dyeing, finishing, washing, stretching. Those are not being counted. So if for the first, you see when the cotton has been turned out, then it's been turned into splicer, and then it's been turned into threads, and then it's been drummed, starched, warped, and then it's been woven. But when we started doing our survey, we realized that why muslin jamdanis are becoming very unpopular, why people are not able to produce fine muslins. The reason were that we were losing the skill of starching. Starching is a technique where you have to soak the rice overnight. Next day, early morning, about 3-4 is a good time. You have to squeeze the rice and make it into a paste. Very slowly, you have to feed the yarn, almost like you're oiling your baby on your lap. And very carefully, you have to feed the yarn until and unless the whole starch is been taken by the yarn. When you talk about these yarns are about 200, 300, 500 counts, which means in an inch, there will be 200 to 500 counts in an inch. So that was one of the primary reasons why muslins they were produced, but not in a quantity. People were losing interest in muslin because the traditional knowledge of starching was missing. Another reason why muslins were becoming unpopular was the industrial use of loom. Bamboo reeds were not being used. So in the image below, you see we have started using the bamboo reeds because bamboo is a natural material, it has its own substance, it holds the fiber well, and that is the reason you could weave fine muslins. And that is some of the products: fine muslin jamdani, 300 counts, 300, 400 count, dupattas and saris that still can be woven. And this brings, when you buy a product in a muslin, you are not only buying for the product, but you're buying for the effort that's going down the line. And a number of people are being paid for buying one product.
tell me there's something wrong with that.
So we have seen the slide on the left earlier also, where the loom was completely in an abundant state, and there were people, no people were working. Now, after our intervention, the looms have already started. There are about 200 people who are engaged in actively engaged in this activity. And this is also a story of women empowerment. Because as I told you earlier also, when this lockdown happened, there was restriction. When the restriction was withdrawn, men moved out from their home for work, for regular work, but women stayed back and they held the torch of producing the muslins, the jamdanis, and they fed their family. Now 85% of the workforce is women, and the new awakening of muslin is because of the women who stayed back are now continuing the work. And this is where we are, undivided Bengal. That's Calcutta, the red part is Bengal. And why we want to show this slide, because it was undivided Bengal where Dhaka, muslin jamdanis were produced. Now here we are fighting with our neighboring countries in conflicting manners that who is producing muslins, who is producing jamdanis. But it was always a part, and if you see the map, it was in 1857 textile map, which talks about each and every part who were producing muslins and they were producing jamdanis, and it was a part of Greater Bengal. And here we are in the map, a red dot in Sundarbans, where we have got a land and there's a mud house we have created. It's a training institute. Now, this is the next thing that we are working on. It's a tribal resource institute that we want to create. And we have already started inviting accommodations, technologists, researchers, tribal knowledge resource person from the tribal communities to come and start documenting the local knowledge resources. We have already started doing natural dyes. We have a group who do natural dyes. We have a group who we have already seen with their spinning and working on starching on producing the yarns for the people to weave. We are also encouraging people to do small nourishment garden in their backyards, because once if the time comes again, at least they would have some food. At least if they have a farming small nourishment garden in their backyard, they can cultivate and have food. And we have also formed a trust, and in that trust we have taken up all these activities. And also we are working on local natural fibers to support local communities. Thank you so much for having me here to share my experience, and thank you, Devika.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful.
Another beautiful textile story.
Maybe we should ask, in case there are people working in the design industry, is there a way they can just reach you by email if they'd like to work with your fabric?
Yeah, they can. We have enterprises. We can also introduce them to various women enterprises if they want to directly work with them, or also they can work with us, whatever way. We are open to that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Amit. It was fantastic.